Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the Wealth Cafe. And I am so excited. We have a guest with us today, which makes my job a little more fun too, of having these different conversations because nobody wants to hear me talk for that long. And today I am so excited. I am being joined by Jaclyn Hoffman, who is one of our authors in Rise and Find coming out November 14th. And Jaclyn is an incredible human being and has an amazing story that she is going to share parts of that story with us today. She is also a licensed professional counselor at Shore Awakenings and has some other cool new projects that she said she's going to let us in on today. So we're getting a little bit of the inside look. So hi, Jaclyn, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let's start off with the juicy stuff. We'll get right to it. So, Rise and Find is coming out November 14th, and you are one of our amazing authors that is part of the project. Give us a
Yeah.
sneak peek and insight. What is your chapter focused on?
Well, so for starters, solo practice, so entrepreneur and, someone that had to navigate the headaches of, starting a practice, but, all the little nuances there. But on top of that, being blindsided by grief. So that was, story. I don't know how much you want me to go into that, but that's the essence of what the chapter is going to be about.
Yeah, and what I love so much and why I'm so, thrilled that you were part of this project to begin with is you have a story that's unique to you, but we all experience this in some way, shape, or form, right? I think grief it's a bit taboo in our society because no one wants to talk about those hard moments. And especially I find that with social media, we kind of get the butterfly and roses and rainbows. Look at this amazing journey, and nobody wants to talk about a lot of the hard stuff, which I'm so thankful for people like you who are opening up that conversation. And so if you are open to it to whatever extent, you went through, if you want to share a little bit more about your grief story and also how that
Sure.
journey then impacted you building a business.
Sure. So prior to the grief happening, I was in the projects of developing my own practice, but it wasn't anything like I have right now, which I am, I'll say I'm grateful for what I have. Uh, in 2019, I was working as a freelance doing in-home counseling in the state of New Jersey for children and families. And I was, working out of my car, ping ponging up and down, the counties, on the coast. And I was working close to 5, 6 days a week. So a lot of time was out of my car or out of the home, but in my car doing the therapy and all that. So on October 2nd, 2019, I actually was heading to work and I received a call from my husband's, I guess it was a sergeant. And they said that he was taken to the hospital, that my husband was at the hospital. I didn't know what was going on, kind of panic state, hit. And I was driving up the parkway. I had to follow, actually, the chief of police was making his way up there and up to the hospital to where my husband was. So I have feeling that they all kind of knew, but obviously I was, the one that was just making my way up there, making sure my kids were situated and all that. So typical day at first, obviously, and, just kind of navigating what was and heading up the parkway to the hospital to find out that my husband had passed away. He was doing a side job. He had a business of his own. So, we were both entrepreneurs and, trying to do our own thing on top of him being also a police officer. And so he had passed away, and in the emergency room, we had the department, his coworkers coming in, and just it was like I could picture it like as if it was
Right, it never
yesterday,
leaves you.
but it's just kind of definitely a moment, a time capsule, I'll say, when it comes to grief and you find out that your person, my husband of 16 years, we were approaching actually 16 years. So we are like a month away, and, just somebody is no longer here with me. So changed things a lot, and that was about 6 months before the pandemic hit. So that was also another, feature that, in terms of navigating the world, because obviously we were all dealing with grief in different ways at that time too, you know.
Yeah, and then you were in this position too, which I can't even imagine, right? There is nothing that can prepare you for getting that phone call, right? And it's the one that no one wants to
Absolutely.
get and no one wants to think
Right.
about. And we pray
Yeah.
that never happens. And I'm so sorry that it happened to you. And I think um what you have also though built and accomplished out of it is so incredible and I think honorable to his memory. I never got the chance to meet him, but just seeing what you've built and the work you're doing now, I think is it's such a testament because so many of us when we hit that pattern of grief, and you see it too in your everyday life, is and all the work that
Yeah.
you do is you can go one of two ways, right? You can kind of rise from this situation and use it to live your life to the fullest, or it can completely decimate you. And I've seen it happen to both, to people in both ways. And so I'd love for you to kind of share the new program, if you're open to it, that you are
Sure.
starting.
Yeah. So I have it's coaching. So I'm actually going into the area of coaching. I am a counselor, with many years of background. So I decided to dive into something that would allow me to expand, but also work specifically with widows. So I am in the process of creating a program working with widows to help them reconstruct their life from grief, to be able to step into the new chapter in their life, but also to not be afraid to experience, if it's relationships or to be able to love life again, love themselves again. Um, I'm my own client, so I've gone through experiences on my own, and I know that grief is different for each person. So, the way I am sharing this program is how I, pretty much went about, helping myself, healing my, self through the grief, and you know, being able to move forward. I say move forward, not on, because certainly Alex, my husband, he was my cheerleader in all this. Even when I was creating my practice before I even got to where I am now, like that. I had the idea of having people underneath me doing in-home counseling, and he would sit across from me and be like, yeah, this is great. He was excited for me, and he was that person for a lot of people, that were looking to, chase their dreams. He was someone that was like, you gotta go after it. So he was he was a cheerleader, not just to me, but I'm sure to many others. So
I love that. And I love hearing that as well. And I think it's interesting too, because as you're entering this widow space, so I've been making the joke that September is everyone's favorite holiday. It's National Long-Term Care Planning Month. It's right up there with Christmas, right? Um, but it's so relevant, especially us as women, because we outlive our male counterparts and spouses and family members by the statistic I read the other day was 5 to 10 years. Personally, in my family, I've seen it even longer. My grandmother is going to be spending, next year will be 25 years since my grandfather passed away. I'm lucky that she is still alive, but that is
yeah.
hard, right? From the emotional standpoint, the financial standpoint. And so I'm thankful that there are people like you who from this tragedy have turned something amazing and you're starting this coaching program because people need that community and to have somebody to turn to who's also been through it, right? I think it's
Yeah.
one thing to just
Yeah.
start a program and say like, hey, I'm going to tell you how to get through grief and how to survive as a widow and what was it you said, move forward, right? Not on.
Move forward. Yeah, I think the idea, and I think people are kind of, scrutinizing on some words too, but yeah, the word of moving on is just kind of like, well, I'm forgetting my spouse, my partner, whoever in the past, and they're going to be forgotten. And a lot of widows have trouble moving forward because they're afraid of that. They're afraid to, they're going to forget their spouse, or they're afraid that maybe they're just not, honoring their spouse anymore, and they choose maybe not to ever even be in a relationship again. And that's really in my heart not the case. And I could speak, probably for many, but we're all going to make our own choice too if we are ever in that circumstance. I know for myself, it's something that he would want is for me to continue to be happy and live on his legacy, things that I'm doing that's in his name and in his honor. And the biggest thing is growing my business, because he wanted me to do that. He was encouraging me to continue to grow and succeed. He wanted, it was all about being happy and doing what you love, and he was doing what he loved.
Yeah. And being, as you said before, he was your biggest cheerleader. And so to have that continue on and to be honoring him in that way is incredible. And I love also too hitting on that concept of legacy, right? Because legacy, it can happen in so many different ways. And one of the best ways that I see it too is honoring someone's legacy also through the way you spend your time and your money and put your finances into that route as well. And so through the business that you're creating and also through, that business is going to generate income. That's the goal.
Yeah,
And that's a way to honor that legacy. And some people can sit there and say, like, but how can you move forward? And it's like, that's what they want, right? Like they want you to grow something and continue to live life to the fullest. And I think,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to also dive into a lot of the, while I have you here, and I'm like, ooh, if we have somebody who's licensed in all things mental health, let's dive in a little bit to in terms of mental health and your finances. So kind of diving a little bit into the theme of the Wealth Cafe, money can be stressful.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could say, even going back to, what my story is about, that is, I would say, probably one of the top, if not like number one, maybe it's just second place, is the financial piece. Because, for one, we were a two income home,
Yeah.
and, certainly you worry, and, you lose your person, you're like, all right, what do I do now? And, certainly the financial piece is definitely a worrisome and stressful, very stressful thing for someone to go through when it comes to, loss.
And it's hard because I sit with people a lot and we talk about the planning aspect of it, right? And I
Right.
always say to them when we talk about life insurance or even long-term care in the sense of long-term care month, I sit there and I'm like, I hope you never need this, right? I hope that you never.
Yeah,
And a lot of people sit there and they shake their heads. And I'm sure people listening to this will say the same thing and say, oh, this will never happen to me. And, maybe you can speak to this as well if you also thought that too. If you're like, it'll never happen to us. And then it does. And your whole world is rocked. And I always tell people, like, it's better to be prepared and have that planning go to waste than to sit here and say, oh my gosh, why didn't we do this?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm grateful for where I am. And, we talk about, as I was saying, the 6 months before the pandemic and things shut down, people were forced to work in some way or to some capacity, or, maybe they couldn't work as well, but things were, certainly difficult. And certainly I had my own challenges as well. But I was grateful for the fact that I was able to take that leave from what I was doing, just so I can, focus on my mental health, and also gather, like work with my kids, support them, and, just sort things out for our future. 100%, like life insurance, I say, for, anybody, even myself, that was the first thing I think after he passed. I was talking to a financial advisor myself, and the first thing he said is, we're going to get you on life insurance. And I was like, okay, so it was just better safe than sorry. You want to have it, then be in a position where if you don't have it, then what happens.
Yeah. And especially too, as you're starting this widows group, it's also really important for people to think about, and if they're watching this too, and maybe they don't have a spouse or a significant other, or even if you do, and as women, like I said, we outlive our spouse and significant others, keeping with that long-term care theme as well, is that
Yeah.
who's going to take care of you?
Right.
Which is a
Right.
hard conversation to have and to think about. And especially as people are widows, it's the assumption of like, well, we thought we would, we all know the story in the movie Up, right? That broke our hearts and we all cried watching that little Disney animated movie of, him taking care of her, and they thought they would grow old together, and someone's going to outlive the other. And so what's the plan in there, especially now that if you're the remaining spouse, I don't think there's the dog and the balloons in the house coming for you and whatever that happened in the story, but
Right.
it's something to consider, right? And it's from a mental health standpoint, it's also very hard to process.
I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. I think about that, and, for me, you know, I for one didn't care to do finances. I wasn't the one that was handling the finances, you
Yeah.
know. So, you know, I had a lot to learn. And, you know, certainly I had, you know, family members that were, you know, helping me and kind of helped me navigate stuff. There were things that I'm still figuring out. I'm still troubleshooting. But, you know, I say like the communication piece between like two partners is definitely important, and it shouldn't be necessarily just on one person, because they talk about like, you know, how both they could put two, I guess there's too many people like, you know, kind of working accounts and whatnot. It gets a little complex, but it's good to know stuff,
Yeah.
because I'm telling you, I was going through passwords that were written down in weird spots. I mean, that was the way he rolled. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
And it took a few days. And I mean, I say a few days, but it was weeks, even probably even months. But thankfully I had, you know, my mom was like my rock and all that. So I'm grateful for her to help me navigate. But um, you know, there were things that he did that I didn't know. You know, people are afraid to talk about money, and I think that's a hard thing. And I lived that. Like, money wasn't always a easy topic to have a conversation with your partner. But yeah, going back to even like the life insurance and understand, like, look, you know, there's some precautions you want to put in place. You want to, you know, make sure you have, you know, put your passwords in one spot, you know. Be smart about that at least, you know. My goodness, I mean, I was going off of like pads, notepads. It
Oh my
was,
gosh, I have had people come to me with like scrap papers, napkins
yes,
that have coffee on them.
yes,
Like,
yes.
my spouse passed away and this is what I have, and they'll hand me like a box that like I'm like, is this an empty box of cat litter? Like, where did you find this and dump all of it in it? I'm like, this is not the
Mm-hmm.
organization we need. But I do want to go back to one comment that you said.
Sure.
It's a hard conversation to have about money, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think a lot of that comes back to some of our childhood trauma, and I always call it your money story. So I'd love to hear from you, you know, obviously we can't share anyone's intimate details, but some things that you've seen in your practice when it comes to people's different trauma and in relation to their money. If you have any, feel free to change everything as you need for your
Yeah,
client.
I think. Yeah, I think they're somewhat generalized, you know, and I can even go to even just knowing from, because I got in social media groups and stuff when I was navigating my grief and from the beginning, and certainly it was helpful, but at the time sometimes it was just like, all right, just got just a little too much,
Mm.
even heart heavy, and it was just I didn't want to take on that energy anymore. But you know, some comments I find is that people, or comments or experiences, is that people have had to, you know, move. They had to maybe change their living situation, which can be understandable, you know, depending on, you know, maybe what their circumstance was.
Yeah.
You know, some people are, you know, feel like they're stuck at their job and they can't do anything greater for themselves, or, you know, pursue something else because they're like, well, I'm the sole income and that's all I can bring to the table, you know. So I think there's a fear of that change. So like fear and money, they just go hand in hand. Any story I find from a client, in anger, I mean, there's another thing too, because also like you lose your person, your home, you're uprooted from your home, you have to change your living situation. I'm sure there's some anger and also secondary grief to that, because you're grieving now the loss of your home, you know, the loss of what you did have, you know, in your space, with your person. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other stories, but I mean, I tell people as a clinician, you know, our money's an energetic exchange.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's helping people. So, you know, someone that might be paying, you know, a small business, you know, for service XYZ is helping that small business to be able to support, you know, what's going on in their home and or what's going on in their life. So, I mean, money is energy. You know, I've worked very hard myself to not have that fear attached to it, you know, and I encourage people to do the same.
Yeah, I love that you've even done that work personally, right? I will say too, even working with money and finances every single day, it's something I go through in my own personal finances. I sit here and it's money is a neutral, right? It's this neutral resource, but it's a lot of our past traumas or even things that we're currently going through that change that. And, you know, for example,
Yeah.
going back to widows, it can even be something I've seen in certain scenarios where it was like, we were supposed to use this money to go do X, Y, and Z. Like, I couldn't possibly go and spend it now. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because it was earmarked for something and now their spouse is gone and they don't know. And I'm like, even back to that legacy topic from before of, okay, how can we use this though and put positivity around it and use it to honor their legacy or to move forward? But that takes a lot of time, and it also takes working with people like you and through your counseling and your coaching in order to get to that point mentally.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I know from my own experiences, he was a project person. Alex was doing projects in the home. And, thankfully I have some skilled people that would be like my dad. He was awesome. He's awesome at doing stuff. So he would come in and help. And, um, you know, a lot of stuff Alex wanted to do to save money. And but he also had the skills to do it. So it was, on his time and all. So like knowing, okay, now I have to put that money towards something and that he was supposed to be here and do. Or if it is that trip that you're supposed to take, you have to um, find a way to like we had talked about the legacy and what would they want you to do, even with it. So I take it from that angle as well. They'd want you to be happy. If it's taking that trip, take the trip. But if it's also, maybe not taking that lavish trip, maybe do something smaller, or talking to someone like you, someone that has the expertise on handling the money, on how to maybe partition it up smartly. I don't know. But yeah, I've had some of my own stories for sure.
I also think one of the coolest things, and so I had this with one set of clients, is they inherited money from a parent that had passed away, and they didn't expect to receive anything, right? So they sat here with this lump sum of money, and they're like,
Mhm.
almost burdened by it. Like you see people get so burdened by having now a chunk of money. And most people would think, oh my gosh, like, doesn't that solve all your problems? How do you, but it can be because you sit here and you want to be a good steward of it and really hold true to that legacy. And so we were having a really open conversation. And I said, I'm like, what would feel good? Right? Like, what would make you feel good about spending this money? And through our talks, we narrowed it down to what that would be for their family. And I love when you
Mhm.
can visibly see in people like their body like relax and they were like, yeah, like that feels good. Like that's how we're going to honor them. Like they were very big on education, so they're using it to pursue education endeavors in their family. And I just think like money is emotional and it is so
It is.
it's all related. As much as I can say it's in neutral, it's also it brings up a lot of emotions around what we do with it. And so just to see that is always amazing.
I feel like as I'm hearing you say that, I'm thinking that even for myself is the price of that person's life. You see that like the significance of like you see that number and you're like, that was my person. That's what my person's life is, and to make to do something with it can also, yeah, be a very difficult thing to manage. And I feel like that's something to also acknowledge. Yeah, you can get a bulk amount of money and be like, yeah, you're good, life is good. No, because now like you're looking at like now as you use that money, or first of all it's that's that person there, that their life, but then you're using it for different things. And I mean, I'm sure I would return money to have my person back.
Yeah.
I think anybody would return their money to get their person back.
Yeah.
But yeah. So and it depends. There are people that have that blessing. I'm gonna say, as hard as that is, it is a blessing. That you're able to navigate. Like myself, I was able to take that time away from work, and the world was shutting down anyway. So I don't know what I would have been doing differently. Um, I'm probably much more stressed even, but dealing with my kids and helping them, um, I was able to afford that, which was good.
Yeah, and that's I think you bring up such a great point, right? It's like you are, and that's the hard part with life insurance. When we have that conversation, it's like, hey, here's the value of your life and what you are worth. And so many people will make the joke to me, they're like, I'm worth more, dead than alive. And I'm like, no, you're forgetting you're invaluable. And I think that
Yeah,
gets so lost in the insurance and estate planning process is and like I said, I hope they never use it. I hope you never need it. I hope this is the biggest waste of our time and we keep it
absolutely.
forever, but if you're not, we have to plan for it. And it's such a hard conversation because everyone would give every dollar back to have that person in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the emotional side.
That's heavy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fine. We're just making people cry now on this.
Sorry.
When you were
It's
sharing
life
it too,
though.
I
It's the
was like, oh my
reality of
gosh, I don't
things.
have tissues.
Yeah. We'll
So I,
preface the beginning of this. Tissues. Putting
yeah,
that note.
I'm gonna put a
Um,
disclaimer on this. Tissues mandatory.
but this is what life is, a part of it. Like inevitably, we know, like death is inevitable.
Yeah.
What do they say? Death and taxes are inevitable.
Yes. And
So,
that's funny. I'm like, yeah.
unfortunately, but to be smart and to prepare, you don't know. I mean, shoot, I mean, I don't want to say, but Alex and I would joke at times and we'd be like, oh, put you in a cedar box and we'll bury you up Mount Hoffman. I'm like, wait, what? We make
Yeah.
jokes back and forth about things. It's on my property, but still, it just, you don't realize, it changes you, it changes your perception on a lot of things, how you look at life, how you look at mental health, how you look at finances when your person is no longer here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard thing to think about, but it's one that, we have to have the conversations about from a financial standpoint, even too, if people know and they have a longer span of time to
Yeah.
sit with you and work through ahead of time, like what it means if that person is no longer here. And it's one of the best gifts I think you can give to somebody is having open communication around, even you talked about with Alex, you're like, I know he would have wanted me to move forward and to continue to build my business and do these things. And I think it's so important to have these conversations with people while they are around and have that open communication. And it's the best gift that you can give somebody, even though it is probably the hardest thing you'll do.
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it any better,
Yeah.
really.
Soundbite.
You should be a counselor. You're good. And you
So
are a counselor in financial, so
it's amazing. Sometimes I feel like, and I sit down with people and they'll start, when people share about their money, they share about everything. And I'm sure you have some crazy stories that you're like, if I could share this, I could write a book and retire on some bougie island. And the same thing,
yeah.
like when people start to share their finances with you, they think they can share everything with you. And you sit there and you're just like, wow, I could have lived my entire
Well,
without knowing that.
money is intimate, and it's a part of, it's part of status. It's a part of who you are. It's a part of, it is an intimate topic. Some people might not have a problem talking about it as much, but if they find that they can open up about money, I mean, I'm sure they can talk about other things with you that are definitely like, all right, you guys save that for somebody else. I'm not that person.
No, I'm sending
But
them to you actually
yeah.
from now on. I'll be like, you're gonna here call Jaclyn. She's more your thank you for sharing. Here's I love
Yeah,
it.
I can say I have my fair share of stories, that's for sure. But you keep going back to the idea of childhood trauma, and certainly, yeah, a lot of times when I'm working with people, I do work with their past, and some of the things that do come up is like how their parents had viewed money, and
Mhm.
how maybe they might have had even experience from like their first relationship, or a lot of it does come from like even their upbringing and how their parents viewed money and poured it onto their children.
Yeah,
So
it is an endless cycle that is very difficult to break, and it impacts the rest of your life and the way that you build wealth, which actually
mhm.
leads me to the final question that I have for you is what is something that you do that's kind of on the smaller scale that makes you feel like you are living your wealthiest life?
Ooh, I like that question.
Yeah.
On a smaller scale,
Yeah, so it doesn't
so
have to be this grand over the top. I take a jet to Paris and then I
oh,
sit on top of the Eiffel
someday
Tower.
maybe, but
Yeah.
you
Man.
know what? I'm really big on I just feel like I want to say like embracing like energy. Like I'm big on
Hmm.
metaphysical stuff. I really like that's like my jam. I mean, that's another thing that I do with the soulful journeys too. And I like doing, myself care even is doing these are they they're tanks, they're floats. So
Oh, the weightless tanks, right? Where you're floating and
yeah,
throw
yeah.
weight or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, so Epsom salt tanks. I do a float actually over towards Marlton. So throwing props to that guy. He's got a beautiful facility, and yeah, I would go there. And it's been a minute since I've done it, but that's my self care. You shut off from the world. I mean, we're constantly like working, and our brains are firing off with so many things we got to do. And I love the fact that I can take that hour 90 minutes just to it's desensitization tank. That's the word I'm looking for. But
Yeah, yes,
um
there it is.
you shut off from noise and you're in like just a quiet calming space. You can have music, you can have some light if you want, but the idea is you shut everything down, desensitize,
Mm.
and it's a good recharge. So going into a place like that and like I'm gonna go and like lay in a tub for an hour by myself and just chill. It's awesome.
I
I
love
highly recommend it.
I love
Yeah.
that. That is awesome. And so thank you so much for coming on today. If people want to connect
You.
with you, where can they find you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
So if you go, I have a website. It's and I guess we'll put it in those too, but it's www.jaclynhoffman.com. I had changed my URL so you can find me easier. But my clinical practice is Shore Awakenings, and that's on LBI. And my other practice I'm doing is Soulful Journeys, which you can also find on Facebook and also on Instagram. So the logo is I certainly give you the information too, but the logo is this adorable little phoenix that my oldest son had designed for me, my logo, and it has like a flaming phoenix on it. Yeah, so that was his work. That's my artist. My other maybe entrepreneur. We'll see. Both kids want to be entrepreneurs, so there's it runs in the blood.
It's brewing. It's brewing. Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much for being on here. We will put all of your links in the
yeah,
show notes here and in the
awesome.
bio. And everyone, please connect with Jaclyn and make sure November 14th you check out her chapter and all of the other amazing ones. November 14th is pre-sale for Rise and Find. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate it.